Righto. So we've got some decent questions here. We've got three of them, Chris. Now,
Sounds fine.
Our first one is from our good friend Steve Campbell, also 2021 Member of the Year.
And also Beard of Knowledge, who has just told us that the Von Erichs, for those of people who are listening, Von Erichs were in world-class wrestling, and it was run by their dad, Fritz, and were in different territories of the NWA, and the title on the Eddie Guerrero was the 2004 WWE title.
There you go. Steve says, to you both, what is your first memory as a fan, and when did you drop out of watching wrestling?
My first memory as a fan that is a clear memory, WrestleMania 5. That's probably my first memory of WrestleMania. Macho Man Hogan, probably watching it on Wild World of Sports more than watching it at pay-per-view, and straight away being connected to the storyline of the old jilted lover. And just loved it, absolutely loved it. And I got more into it after that, and then started watching older VHS cassettes and then trying to keep up. Fell out of wrestling about year 8 or 9 at high school. I was about 14. Started focusing too much on girls and partying. And unfortunately, wrestling was the thing. But I always still liked it. And I came back to wrestling 2001, 2002, when the Attitude Era started really cranking up. And I was in America for 2002 to work in New York. And I was only 19, and I thought, oh, how good is this? Went to the Times Square WWE location. So excited, like could not have been any more excited. And it was closed. It was closed down. So that was disappointing. And just to add to that story, the same year, 2002, I was in Canada traveling after I'd finished my job, and I was at the Hershey store in Niagara Falls, and I met the late great Chris Benoit at the Hershey store with his partner at the time, who it's Nancy, isn't it? His partner, Nancy Benoit. And they were together, and he was very short. I couldn't believe how short he was. I'm a tall guy, and I absolutely towered over him. And I was with a guy whose name was Alberto. He was an English guy that I was traveling with, and he was like a bodybuilder, so he was absolutely ripped. And he said to me, "Oh, you know, this." He goes, "You guys are huge." He goes, "You could be in the wrestling." To the guy I was with, and the worst thing about this is, right, I had a photo with Chris Benoit and Alberto, and Nancy took the photo, but it was on Alberto's camera. I have asked this guy, Alberto, he's still in the UK. I've asked him, did you ever get that photo developed? Because this is before the days of digital. And can you send me a copy? And he said he has it, and then he's just been blanking me ever since. So I'm gonna head to the UK as soon as I can, and I'm gonna find you, Alberto, and I'm gonna come and take that photo.
He's probably listening to the show. For me, I've shared this on the show before, but I remember my first memory of wrestling was my parents bought a brand new TV, and we had the TV guy, antenna guy, coming out to install everything. And I remember he was sitting there tuning. Remember you had to tune the channels in?
Yeah.
And I was a 6-year-old just sitting there watching him do it, and all of a sudden, Wide World of Sports come on, and I remember it was Junkyard Dog, Big John Studd. Were wrestling. I was just like, what the hell is this? And that was my very first memory. But my fondest memories were going to the video store and hoping that they're all there and waiting for them to come out, all the pay-per-views. Like you, I probably got out of wrestling around 93, 94, year 7 or 8. I didn't like, I don't know, I really liked the character / comic book hero type feel of wrestling. When they went away from that, it didn't really appeal to me anymore. Especially, no offense to the girls, but especially when they started bringing the girls in, and it was more about, the puppies, and I was just like, what's this? This is shit.
That's about when I came back to wrestling.
Yeah, didn't like it. But the early days of WCW, not the early days, but the late 90s, early 2000s of WCW were awesome. They were really good because they started, they had the Mortal Kombat character, and all the WWE wrestlers were coming over. That was a good time. Good time. Yeah, Goldberg was just this very Ultimate Warrior-like at the time.
Goldberg and Sting.
Yep. Our next question comes from Justin Terry. Name one wrestler you believe, if you were able to sit down and speak about wrestling, would have a long conversation with, and who would have a long conversation with you, and another who would just brush you off and call you a mark? It's a good question.
Well, first one that would brush you off is Matt Cardona. He'd just brush you off and wouldn't want to talk to you. Hi, Matt, if you're listening. Because I asked Matt, I reached out to Matt. I have his details, and he didn't respond. Disappointing. I offered him a chance to come on the Wrestling with Figs podcast and promote his Australian visit. I said, hey, Matt, we're here. We are the biggest Australian Wrestling with Figs podcast going around. We might be about 3 million subscribers lower than your little podcast, but he just brushed me off. Person who I reckon would have a good chat, I think Bret Hart would love to have a good chat, but I think you'd have to get him in the right frame of mind. I think you were just maybe sitting around having a beer or a Molson in Canada, and maybe at the ski resort, and Bret Hart was there. I reckon he'd sit down and tell you his whole story and career. But I reckon if you saw him at the airport and tried to pull him aside, he'd probably tell you to piss off. So
piss off. I'm going to say who I think would have a really good conversation would be $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. Yeah. I think he'd be really, really good. To blow you off, that didn't sound too good. God.
Probably be Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels would blow you off.
Yeah. I've never liked Shawn Michaels. 100% he would. 100%. Or Triple H would. You know what I mean?
But he's still a bit too cool for school.
Yeah, mate. Shawn Michaels for sure. HBK. And, $1 Million Man. I'd love to have a chat with $1 Million Man.
Last question, Jamie.
Last question. From Stephen Cook. Thoughts on released wrestlers making up a decent chunk of the 2K22 roster? I'll answer this first. Thankfully, I don't play video games. Don't have time to. And two, there wouldn't be a game if they didn't release them. There wouldn't be a game if they didn't add them in the game. But it doesn't make sense, right? So hopefully I'd assume that the wrestlers would be making something from it, right? Or no, because they wouldn't know their name. I don't know.
That would be under license of the WWE. It'd be like FIFA. Yeah. FIFA has license of the leagues. So the FIFA soccer game has ability to use all of the clubs and players without probably paying them much. My thing is, I think it moves too fast for them to not have released wrestlers in the system. Like, there'll be downloadable content and changes, but these games take 12 months to build and develop and create, and the amount of work that goes into the graphic design and the sculpting of the look of the game, you can't just change it. Look at the cricket game that came out this year, had Tim Payne on the cover. All of a sudden he gets in a scandal with a bit of naughty texting, and then they have to release a patch on the first day to take his face off the loading screen.
Oh, God.
It's like, it's just too hard to keep up.
The way I look at it, right? So if you're a wrestler that's been released, I would assume you would love what you do, right?
Yeah.
You'd love what you do. Even if you got sacked, you got stood down, you left of your own accord, you'd still feel pretty chuffed that you're in a part of a video game, or they still released an action
film. I don't reckon it works. I reckon they get bitter. I reckon a lot of these guys get really bitter about being released and feel like they're undervalued, underused, and I don't know. My son and I have often talked about whether we could get a card in FIFA before the end of our lives, but unlikely.
Well, that wraps up Q&A. The best question for me, I'm going to say, was the who would you sit down and have a chat with, and who wouldn't give you the time?
Yeah, I like that. Good question. Yep. Go on. Happy with that.
Good on Justin Terry. Well, that wraps up another show. Hey, you know what? This is episode 20, and another 6 episodes. That marks 12 months of the Wrestling with Figs podcast.
Amazing.
26 episodes. It's half a year. We do it every fortnight. So that's almost 12 months. Or it is 12 months.
And if you add on the other 20 episodes we did before, we turned the live stream into the podcast. It feels like we've been doing this a while.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to do us for this week, guys. Thank you all so much for joining us once again. Please leave us a cracking review on Apple iTunes. It helps us get the show out there and attract more of an audience. You can find us on all of our social channels: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and always use the hashtag The Hunt Never Ends, because you know why, Chris?
It never ends, and I reckon it's 26 episode time. We'll do some sort of special giveaway. I'll organise it. I've got an idea.
Yeah. Stay tuned.
The first birthday of the Wrestling with Figs podcast.
There you go. Looking forward to it.
A dinner date with Jeff Schwareb.
That'll be here before you know it. Yep. Well, that wraps us up, guys. Thanks so much again. Much appreciated, and we'll see you in the toy aisles.
We will see you in the toy aisles. Have a good week, guys.
Cheers.